In Surah At-Tawbah of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله والمسيح ابن مريم وما أمروا إلا يعبدوا إلها واحد لا إله إلا هو سبحانه عما يشركون. They took their priests and their rabbis as Lord and God beside Allah, and they did the same thing with the Messiah, the son of Mary. But they had not been ordered other than to worship one God. There is no God beside him. Far removed is he from this shirk of taking your mufti and your maulana as your God beside Allah. So a man came to the Prophet, Allah's blessings be upon him, and said, O Messenger of Allah, but the Christians do not worship their priests, and the Jews do not worship their rabbis. How could Allah say so? Which surah is this? Somebody tell me. Surah At-Tawbah, very good. The Prophet, Allah's blessings be upon him, replied and said, did they not make halal what Allah made haram? That is shirk. Would you kindly tell your government, please? Call them on the phone and tell them for me, please. Because every minister of government will have to answer in the grave. Every sultan is going to have to answer in the grave, so they should know. Did they not make haram what Allah made halal? That is shirk. If you make haram what Allah made halal, that is shirk. And did the people not follow them in it? That is their shirk. Example, Allah had prohibited riba, borrowing and lending money on interest, riba. But if you go to the Torah today, you'll see the Torah says that it is haram for an Israelite to lend money on interest to his brother Israelite. A Jew should not lend to a Jew on interest, no. Haram. But it is halal. He can lend money on interest to those who are not Jews. No. That's wrong. You made halal what Allah made haram. And the rabbis accepted it, and the people followed the rabbis. I lived in New York for 10 years, I know. So what they did was to make haram what Allah made halal. In order for them to institute a monetary system which will prohibit the use of gold and silver as money, they needed big wars, and they needed to win the war. And that is the First and Second World War. And a new monetary system came to the world after the Second World War. That monetary system has been with us since then, 1944. But I have news for you tonight. There's another war coming, and it's just around the corner. And when that war comes, they're going to finish this monetary system. They don't need it anymore. And they'll bring a new one. But the Mufti doesn't know that. Who gives his bogus fatwa that the money we're now using is halal. Mufti, are you listening to me? Mufti, you're going to have to answer in the grave, Mufti, for declaring this money to be halal. No. This money was possible because they first declared that money to be haram. The Articles of Agreement of the International Monetary Fund prohibit the use of gold as money. Dr. Mahathir was not aware of that. I am not a politician. I don't comment on politics. But when someone does what is right, I declare that he did what is right, and I don't care who is annoyed with me. A scholar of Islam doesn't bow his head before public opinion. Dr. Mahathir was not aware that the International Monetary Fund prohibited the use of gold as money. But Dr. Mahathir was able to recognize, as no one else recognized, that this was wrong. That this was wrong. That you cannot prohibit the use of gold as money. And Dr. Mahathir did what no one else did in the history of this country. Let me remind the Malaysian people, if they need to be reminded, that Dr. Mahathir did what no one else did ever did, and perhaps no one else will ever do. When I met him, I told him that. I said, you're the second one to do it. The first was General Charles de Gaulle. General Charles de Gaulle recognized that this was wrong, this was unjust. Bringing a new monetary system in the world, and in order for this bogus system to survive, you have to prohibit the use of gold as money. So Charles de Gaulle stood up in the French National Assembly in 1966. That's why the French people loved Charles de Gaulle. And he blasted them. In the French National Assembly, he blasted them. And he declared this to be an unjust monetary system that you brought into the world. And so they took out their knives for him. Yeah. And they finished him. And after Charles de Gaulle, the only other one was Dr. Mahathir. And so this country should be proud of Dr. Mahathir, because he recognized what no one else recognized. And no one else dares to recognize. They don't have the courage to recognize what he recognized. And tonight I have to give credit where credit is due, regardless of the price I have to pay. At the time when I said that Dr. Mahathir was only the second, I was wrong. I didn't know he was the third. I didn't know that there was one before him. I didn't know that there was one before Charles de Gaulle. But he's today forgotten. They called him a playboy. Ahmad Sukarno was more than a playboy. Ahmad Sukarno was more than a playboy. When Indonesia became independent, Ahmad Sukarno called in the ulama. He had the courage to do it. And he asked them about this money. I'm not a scholar of Islam, you are the scholar. Tell me, how can we have paper as money? How can we have paper as money? And the ulama replied to him and said to him, the paper would be halal only if it is redeemable in gold. Meaning you could take the paper and get the gold at a fixed rate. So the paper will be like a check. So Ahmad Sukarno decided that the Indonesian rupiah would be redeemable in gold, and he fixed the rate. But the people who want to rule the world, they had made that haram. In the Articles of Agreement of the International Monetary Fund. So they had to launch a coup via a crooked man called Suharto to get rid of Sukarno. So there were three. And then long later came Najmuddin al-Bakan in Turkey. And if this lecture were to reach you in Turkey, I want you to remember Najmuddin Erbakan, because that was the last leader you had. That was the last leader you had in Turkey, because he put the gold dinar up in front of the people and he said, this is money. Nobody dares to do that today. Nobody dares to do that today. In 1944, we have another 5 minutes before the Azan. Let me take you to the conference that took place when the Second World War was coming to an end. Allahumma Jalla Jalaluhu. So we continue inshallah after Salat. Bismillahi awwaluhu wa akhiruh. What is the story? How did they do it? How did modern Western civilization get us to surrender the Khilafah state? How did they get us to surrender the free and the fair market and introduce the banking system to destroy the free and the fair market? How did they get us to surrender money? That is a story which ought to be told. The most important actor at work in every single one of these battlegrounds was Britain. Britain led the way in getting us to surrender the Khilafah state. Britain led the way with the Bank of England, which was established somewhere around 1796, I believe. I can be wrong. To get us to surrender the market, the free and the fair market. And Britain got us to surrender money as well. And so if you pledge your loyalty to Britain, you couldn't be serving Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And that's what Muhammad Iqbal did. If the people of Pakistan and the people of India are not aware of it, I ask you to do your homework. Up to the day he died, Iqbal was a loyal subject of Britain, pledging his loyalty to the British Crown and the British government. Yeah. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan, was a loyal British, pledging his loyalty to the British Crown, to Britain. The All India Muslim League were all people who pledged their loyalty to Britain. Amongst the ulama, there were those who refused to do that, and they went to prison. But the people of India and Pakistan chose to abandon the scholars of Islam and to follow those who neither knew the Islam, the Quran, or were unaware that Allah had prohibited in the Quran their pledging their loyalty to Britain. They didn't even know it. And so he became Sir Muhammad Iqbal. I'm not disrespecting him tonight because he was a great scholar and he's a great poet. But somebody has to set the record straight. If I do this in Pakistan, they'll arrest me. So it has to be done from outside of Pakistan. Somebody has to set the record straight. Britain played the most strategic role of all in every single one of these battlegrounds. And yet the founders of Pakistan pledged their loyalty to Britain. And yet I must believe that you are serving the mission of Islam? What a joke. What a joke. What Britain did was what the banking system is now doing. The bank has so much money, that's all, but the bank lends 10 times more. It's called fractional reserve banking. It is unjust. It is a system of legalized theft, and you should have your hand cut off for that. But they established the Bank of England to become the big thief of all. And so the sterling pound is riding high. Britain can lend. Britain can become the money lender of the world. Because Britain has so much gold, but Britain is lending so much paper. And all that you have to do is get off what is known as the gold standard, and then you can print the paper. So that's how it started. With paper, which is no longer redeemable in gold, and the bank issuing more paper than you have gold. The sterling pound used to be a gold coin. And then one Sunday morning, perhaps while they were in church, it became paper. And so you have a monetary system now emerging in the world in which the British pound is the supreme currency, the international currency. And Britain becomes the money lender of the world. And Britain is becoming richer and richer. Whoever owns a bank is very rich. Why? Because you can make money out of thin air. And they call it fractional reserve banking. But the real story that we have to tell, and somebody should teach this story to the scholars of Islam, the ulama, because they don't know it. The real story doesn't begin with the Bank of England. The real story begins after the Second World War was coming to an end, when they came together in an international conference in a place called Bretton Woods in upstate New York. And the leader of the British delegation was a very famous economist called John Maynard Keynes. And Britain went to the conference as, you know, His Imperial Majesty, hoping that they'll be able to salvage something for the sterling pound. But the time had come for Pax Britannica to go. And the time had come for Pax Americana to replace Pax Britannica. Because in the Quran, in Surah Al-Mursalat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said something, but we didn't catch it. Now, He said, Intaliku ila zillin ذي ثلاث شعب. Proceed now. Let the historical process now proceed to a shadow which will now descend upon the world, a shadow. And this shadow will emerge in three stages, When Imran gives his opinion in interpreting the Quran or interpreting the Hadith, I beg of you never, never, never to accept my opinion. I can't do more than that, can I? Please tell that to my critics for me, please. Never accept my opinion unless and until you are convinced that I am correct. That's the way I was with my teacher. And that's the way I want you to be with me. So if I make a mistake and you continue to perpetuate that mistake, what kind of student you are? But if you correct your teacher, mashallah, may Allah bless such a student. So if I correct Dr. Muhammad Iqbal, I'm not doing anything disrespectful. Please understand that. I say that the three shadows represent the world order of Britain, Pax Britannica, in which the sterling pound now controls the world of money. And then Pax Americana, which replaced Pax Britannica. And then the US dollar replaces the sterling pound. And now we have arrived at that moment in the historical process when I, as a student of international relations, that's what I am, I recognize that the United States is now in irreversible decline. You don't have to believe me. Check it out. There's a great war coming because that's what they use. They use big wars to bring about fundamental change. And that a new actor will come to replace Pax Americana. I recognize it as Pax Judaica because their objective is to establish what we call the Khilafah state. That's what they want to do. But they're going about it the wrong way. And therefore that a new monetary system will replace the existing monetary system. So goodbye to the US dollar. And when the US dollar goes, the euro will also go. Yeah. And the entire system is based on the dollar. Your ringgit does not have any legs on which to stand. I'm sorry to tell you that. I'm sorry to tell you that. Your ringgit has no legs on which to stand. No. And when the US dollar goes, your ringgit is also going to go. And every single paper money in the world will collapse with it. You don't have to believe me. You could follow Mufti. So these are the three stages of the shadow. This is my opinion. And do not accept my opinion unless you're convinced that I am correct. But you can't say I'm wrong unless you tell me what's right. Is that asking that? Is that asking too much of my critics? I'm getting more and more critics all the time. Yeah, some of them probably are paid to become my critics. So I ask you, you cannot say I am wrong until you say what is right. So come forward and tell us what is right and hope that nobody laughs at you. This is what they brought into the world at Bretton Woods in 1944. A monetary system through which they effected the passage from the sterling pound as the international currency to the US dollar to replace it. That is Bretton Woods. From Bretton Woods came the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. And these two, Bretton Woods and the IMF, brought into being a monetary system which we have to explain to you briefly. 40 years ago, when I was in the classroom, listening to this for the first time, I am a student of philosophy. I did my master's degree in philosophy. And I'm a student of Islam at an Institute of Islamic Studies. And now I'm in the classroom of international relations, and I'm listening to international monetary economics for the first time in my life. And I'm hearing these strange things.